Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be updating the AD carry tier list for patch 7.15. So first up in the tier 1 here is going to be Sivir. Now Sivir did get a really big buff this patch to her Q. It did end up getting hotfixed, so it's not as good as it originally was at the start of the patch, but I'm pretty sure at the start of the patch, Sivir had like a 56 or 57% win rate. It went up like 7% due to the buff to her Q, so they did nerf that a little bit, but she still is a very strong pick right now. I think overall for solo queue and in the meta we're in right now, she just fits in really nicely. We're seeing a lot of these supports like Thresh and Blitz being played in the bot lane right now, and Sivir just does a really good job at negating what they want to do in the laning phase. We're also in a tank meta, and with Sivir's ultimate, it just makes it so easy for those tanks to engage and get onto the back line, and you can very easily just win team fights with Sivir by popping your ultimate at the right time. She also does a really good job at punishing AD carries that don't have a lot of wave clear in the early game. I think Sivir is especially good for lower elos because lower elo players probably aren't the best at CSing under tower. So if they pick someone like Vayne, you can just shove Vayne in the entire laning phase and she's gonna miss a lot of CS because Vayne isn't the best AD carry at CSing under tower, but she still does have a very high play rate in the lower elos. Overall, I just think Sivir is a pretty easy pick. She's got great wave clear. Her kit is pretty good for solo queue, so I'd be looking to pick her up for 7.15. And then one thing to note for the build for Sivir in this patch, most people are going in Essence Reaver as the first item. Statistically though, that's not what's performing best on Sivir right now. The best build for her is Infinity Edge, Static Shiv, and then Rapid Fire Cannon. A lot of people, what most people are building right now is they're going for an Essence Reaver, Phantom Dancer, and then Infinity Edge, but that's actually performing quite a bit worse than the IE Static Shiv Fire Cannon combo, so just keep that in mind for when you are playing Sivir. Now, as for Sivir's matchups right now in this patch, there's not too many picks that are beating her, but I would try to avoid Twitch. I think Twitch is just a really good pick against Sivir, mainly because Sivir is a very short-ranged AD carry, and come a mid to late game team fight, that Twitch with his ultimate up, you're not gonna be able to hit him, and he's just gonna be able to one-shot you or like three-shot you if he is max build. So that is definitely a harder matchup if it does end up going to the late game. And then also, it's pretty hard for you to spell shield Twitch's E. Sivir does pretty well into almost anything else though. She especially does well against any champion that does have a telegraphed ability, so she does well into Tristana or Caitlyn or Ashe, mainly because with the Tristana E, it's very easy for you to spell shield that. It's easy to spell shield the Caitlyn Q as well as the Ashe W, so overall in this patch, Sivir's a great pick besides against Twitch in my opinion. Next up in the tier 1 here is going to be Draven. So Draven stayed a really good pick down in the bot lane for the past few months now. He's been a great pick after he did get a buff to his Q, and then a lot of the items got changed, which were really good for him. Pretty much all of his core items got buffed. It was at least 4 or 5 patches ago now, and he stayed a very solid pick down in the bot lane since then. Overall in this patch, he doesn't really lose to any matchups right now. He's got a really good laning phase, and if you do know how to play Draven well, then you're really never going to lose lane on the champion. You can always play aggressive with him in lane, and if you do get a snowball going, then you're just going to be able to zone the enemy the entire lane from CS. If they do walk in for CS, then you just chunk them out and you just kill them if they do try to CS in the laning phase. The only thing I dislike about the champion is that a lot of people don't know how to control their aggression on Draven. Most Draven players just want to play super aggressive in your face, and they're always in there going for kills, but I feel like a lot of the time in solo queue, the Draven player just goes way too aggressive, and even though they're super fed, they just end up throwing the game because they don't control their aggression. If you can control your aggression on Draven to the point where you're still able to get kills, but you're not dying multiple times after you get fed, I think that's what makes a really good Draven player, and he can be a very, very strong pick as long as you don't just throw your lead by playing too aggressive in the early game. The best build for Draven in this patch right now is not actually going Duskblade. I'm pretty sure in the previous patch before Duskblade got hotfixed, it was a pretty good item on Draven, but Duskblade isn't as good as it previously was, and Death's Dance, Static Shiv, and Infinity Edge is what's doing best right now on him in this patch. You can also go for like a Rapid Fire Cannon in there as well, and I just think going Death's Dance and then crit after that is how you should be playing Draven in 7.15. And then Draven's really the only champion in this patch right now that I don't really think has a counter in the laning phase. If you can play Draven well, then there's nothing that you should really be afraid of to lane against in 7.15. Next up in the tier 1 here is going to be Twitch. So in my opinion, in this patch, you should definitely have Twitch in your champion pool. I just think overall he's a very strong AD carry for solo queue, mainly because if the game reaches the 30-minute point, if you get Twitch to 3 or 4 items, then if it's a decent Twitch player, he's going to carry the game almost every single time. I would want to have Twitch on my team as the AD carry if it does go to late game every single time, just because his ultimate is super strong come a late game team fight. He can sit in the very back of a team fight. He's got his stealth, so he doesn't even need to pop out right away. He waits for the enemy team to engage on his team, and then he just pops out of stealth and he pretty much 3-shots the whole enemy team with his rune-ins and just with his E, and the fact that his ultimate does pierce through the enemy. So I just think that if you do let this AD carry get to 3 or 4 items, and if you don't shut him down in the early game, then he's the best AD carry that you can play in this patch. And then unlike a lot of the other scaling AD carries though, he doesn't actually have the worst laning phase. His laning phase isn't even that bad, especially if you do pair him up with an aggressive support, then your E damage in the early game is actually really good. And if you do get a few autos off and get that E pop on the opponent, then you're gonna win trades a lot of the time. I think that's like another reason to why he's super good, just because if you're playing someone like Vayne, Vayne's got a really weak early game and it's gonna be a lot harder to reach that late game, but with Twitch you can easily go even in lane almost every single time, or even win lane sometimes, so he's just a very solid pick for solo queue. And then the final major reason to why I think he's super good for solo queue is because he's one of the only AD carries that can actually roam around and influence the map with his stealth. If you do get ahead in the laning phase and you're shoving the enemy into tower, I would look to go for roams to the mid lane. If you do end up winning lane, then go for a roam top lane or mid lane with your stealth, and a lot of the time you will be able to pick up a kill because the enemy bot lane isn't going to ping that you're missing a lot of the time, especially if you do end up taking the tower. So just really abuse Twitch's stealth, and I think that's another reason to why he's great for solo queue. And then to round out the tier 1 AD carries for this patch is going to be Misfortune. So Misfortune is probably the easiest out of all of the AD carries in the tier 1 here. I just think that she's a very simple to play AD carry, but she's also a strong pick right now. So with lethality getting buffed in the previous patch, it helps out Misfortune a lot because her auto attacks, her Q, as well as her ultimate are just going to do a lot of damage come the mid game. If you can get just good ultimates off with Misfortune, then that's really all you have to do on the champion. You don't even have to really auto attack with her. All you got to do is press R in a team fight. If it hits 3 or 4 members, then that's all you really need to contribute for your team to win the game. She's actually got a pretty good laning phase as well. Misfortune at all stages of the game is probably one of the most solid AD carries. She's got great poke in lane with her Q. You can definitely look to abuse her, especially in the lower elos, because players won't really respect the fact that your Q bounce on a low health minion is going to do a ton of damage if they're standing behind it, and you can just easily look to bully the enemies out of lane by using that, and you can just get a great advantage by getting that Q poke off with Misfortune. And then she does synergize pretty well with the meta right now, because Misfortune does synergize great with champions that can lock down the enemy team, so she can get a fully channeled ultimate off. And because we are seeing more tanky engaged junglers being played right now, it just allows Misfortune to very easily be able to line up her ultimate for a lot of damage in team fights. And then for MS matchups right now, I found that usually she's a really good pick into AD carries that don't have gap closers, because they're not going to be able to dodge out of your ultimate's damage if they don't have their flash up. I found to struggle a little bit against someone like Tristana, just because if you start channeling your ultimate with MF, Triss can either rocket jump away from the ult damage, or she can just ult you to negate your ultimate's damage. So I find that matchup a little bit harder, but really statistically she's not losing to any AD carry right now in this patch. So if you do know how to play Misfortune well, then you're gonna have a lot of success in 7.15. And then for the tier 2 picks in this patch, these are still very strong champions. You can play them to a lot of success in this patch, but generally they do get outclassed a little bit by the tier 1 champions. So for example, Jinx is still a very good scaling late game AD carry, but I would still prefer Twitch over Jinx in the late game, which is why she's tier 2 and not tier 1. And for someone like Kalista does have a great early game as well, but I would still prefer Draven in the laning phase. If you can play Draven well, and you can also play Kalista well, then I think Draven is just overall the better early game AD carry in this patch. Now for the tier 3 picks in this patch, these champions are average. You can play them, but they're really outclassed right now by the tier 2 and the tier 1 champions, and these picks are Vayne and Lucian. So I think Vayne, she just struggles way too much in the early game to be a viable pick. If you get past the early game and you can reach the mid to late game, then you're gonna have great success on her, but a lot of the time, if you're just getting shoved in or you're just getting camped in the laning phase and you're just playing against a better early game AD carry, then it's gonna be very hard for you to get to the point in the game to where you want to be. And then for Lucian right now, he's an AD carry pick to where he's not super good at one specific thing, and I think that really either makes him a very strong pick for solo queue or it makes him a very weak pick. Right now, he's kind of in that weaker phase because recent item nerfs to Blade the Ruined King, and I think Lucian also got a nerf recently. It just brings him down in power because he doesn't have that late game scaling of a Twitch or of a Jinx. He doesn't have that super strong early game of a Draven or a Kalista, and he doesn't provide any utility for his team like a Sivir does. So I think that he's just not that great of a pick right now in this patch. You can still play him, but obviously I think the tier 2 and the tier 1 picks are just a lot stronger than him. So that is going to be it for this AD carry tier list for 7.15. If you guys did enjoy the video, then please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, guys. Have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.